You know what time it is, no matter where you've been. So let's do it again. Listen up and let the sun shine in. We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
Well, Daniel and Big Show and Soul Training Nation, we are blessed beyond belief today to have yet another special guest in our midst. That's Mr. Aubrey Johnson. Aubrey is a friend, an author, a speaker, a minister, a growing Christian, and now he gets to add soul training guest to his resume.
That's going to be the highlight of it.
Amen.
He's a Renaissance man of sorts.
Renaissance, and I'm glad we have spell check for that because I couldn't spell Renaissance on a resume if I had to. Maybe I could. I don't know. But we are extremely honored and very thankful to have Aubrey in our Soul Training Studios to be with us. It's been a long time coming, and very thankful that he is with us. And we're going to talk about hopefully a multitude of things, but mainly we're going to talk about I mentioned that he's an author. He's an editor of a very nice volume called Parenting by the Parables, a guide to spiritual parenting. And I think there's probably never been a bigger time in modern history or in my lifetime where there's a greater need for improved parenting. And we're going to talk a little bit about grandparenting because we have a lot of grandparents in our society raising kids. And so we're going to talk about that. And we have one of the best here, Mr. Aubrey Johnson, is going to impart his knowledge and wisdom and experience on us and you, our dear listener. So, Aubrey, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 64 years old and been enjoying a life in preaching. I'm a preacher first and just had a wonderful experience at several congregations in Tennessee and Oklahoma and Alabama and various parts. But my hobby is writing, so I enjoy sharing some of the things that God blessed me with, and I just really enjoy wordsmithing and sharing abundant life. I think that's kind of what I do, that Jesus said he came that we might have life and have it abundantly. And so I believe that philosophy of church and of spirituality and of parenting is what we're supposed to be doing. So it's great to have an opportunity to share a little bit.
And something that I missed, because I wanted you all to talk, that I made a long list of all the things when I think of Aubrey Johnson, the things that popped in my mind. And there's a couple that I left off in my intro, but I think about father, grandfather, encourager, neighbor, friend, all of those things. And I think that kind of, with what Aubrey says, kind of summarizes what he means to so many of us in the brotherhood. And there are no strangers. They're just friends we haven't met yet. So if you don't know Aubrey, you will get to know him, hopefully, through this podcast. So, Dano, I'm hitting the ball to you.
Yeah, it's awfully good to have you with us in studio, especially. Been looking forward to this opportunity. You're a pretty prolific writer. How many volumes do you have published?
I have, I think, probably 17.
17.
Oh, man, if that was me, I'd be like, boom, 17, working on 18. He's a lot more humble than I am.
So with those books, which one would you say is maybe the most challenging volume that you wrote?
Well, my favorite book is The Seed Principle. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's the favorite is because that's the foundation of everything. Jesus said, if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand anything that I'm teaching you. And it blessed me. It opened my eyes, and it was thrilling to get to have that experience. So that stands out in my mind. They're all a little bit different. I like Spiritual Patriots, the book of Jude, because there are a few things more timely in our society than people who will be spiritual patriots and stand up for their faith. There is a faith once delivered unto the saints, and it's worth standing for.
Absolutely.
Souls are at stake. The kingdom's at stake. And Barnabas is fun because it's just that's not exactly where I began, but I probably had done work on it before other works were published. And I wrote about encouragement because I wasn't very good at it. So a lot of the things that I write, it's because I need something myself, and I'm learning and growing, and it was turned down again and again and again. I think the third time I sent out 7 copies and got back all of my letters that said thanks but no thanks. And I got a call from Denny Lloyd, who's the assistant editor over at the Gospel Advocate. I think it was a year after I'd sent it out, and he said, we may have an interest in this book. And that really started my relationship with the Gospel Advocate, and I'm always grateful for them for what they do.
You always are thankful for people who gave you that first shot.
Amen.
And I tell you, we'll put a link on our Facebook page to ways people can get these books. Do you have any other preferred way folks can order or contact you to get books from you?
Some of the books you can get by emailing customer service at gospeladvocate.com. That's a good way to get a hold of them. And Amazon, I don't typically distribute books just because I'm busy writing. So the less packaging and managing I'm doing, the more I'm freed up to do what I love to do.
What keeps you writing? I was just curious. Because, what the books that I'm familiar with, The Barnabas Factor, Parenting by the Parables, the book about being civil, the civility book, the Seed Principle, and all those are such a wide range. So how do you come up with the next thing? What's next? And then another book that I'm about to, that I'm looking forward to is the Organized Overseers. And how do you know where does your vision come from? What's next?
Well, I write because I can't not write. It's just.
Is it a creative outlet for you?
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing else that I do where I lose myself. I mean, I forget to eat and forget to sleep and just have, you just have that flow that when I get to write, it just
feels wrong not to write.
Yeah. Very good. So where do they come from? I mean, I'll never live long enough to write half of the books that I've got in my brain. I started writing one here recently. I woke up from a dream, and this has never happened to me before, but I had a dream, and this thing was quite developed in my mind. It's funny how our minds work. There's something always going on, even when we're asleep. And got up and made the outline. And the morning when I got up, and I've been preaching it and writing it here recently, they come from a lot of different places. Sometimes it's a need that I have. Sometimes it's just this aha moment. Sometimes it's something that I'm reading, and I usually have several things that I'm working on at the same time, which is not a good idea. I really need to focus on one, which is, I did that with the Seed Principle. I'd just gotten out of graduate school, and I just buckled down and said, I'm going to finish one thing, and that got me going. It's fun because you get to think about it all the time. When you're writing more than one, then your mind is divided. So it's a little bit different experience.
Well, I want to talk to you about parenting by the parables because I am a parent of 2 young boys. My boys are 8-year-old and 4-year-old. And I am, I thought I would know a lot more about parenting by this point, but maybe I'm a slow learner. I don't know. But I've read some of this Parenting by the Parables. I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about how this book came about, where did the idea come from? If you can just speak about this book right now, let the listener know.
Well, I guess part of it is you think about what you wish that you had known at the time. I didn't know much about parenting. I think I grew up with my kids. We were really young. We were married 3 years. We had 3 kids. So they were born one right after the other, 78, 79, and 80. So they've all just recently turned 40, and we had a wonderful time as they were growing up. But I wasn't that smart. I just basically knew that if they do something good should happen to them. And if they did something bad, then they shouldn't be rewarded for doing something bad. Nothing good will come from doing something bad. So never reward inappropriate behavior. And kids learn real quick if they can manipulate parents. If I fuss long enough, or if I fuss loud enough, or if I can play you against each other. So to me, the only thing that I knew then, of course, I loved the Lord and tried to be a good Christian, but consistency. I think consistency is so huge in parenting. So you have the immediacy of consequences, the appropriateness of consequences. And when we do that, I believe that children respond.
Is it fair to say it's a team effort too between the mother and the father? They not only should my parenting be consistent, it should also be consistent with my wife's.
Absolutely. That united voice, it's like a congregation when the elders and deacons and ministers are all saying the same thing. How beautiful, how wonderful for youth. And everyone in that congregation, and I've been in congregations where that wasn't so, and you could feel the unrest and the tension and the coalitions and things going on. It happens on all levels of society. But I'm glad that I had a chance to reflect a little bit on what I would want. This book one of the reasons I love it is because you're parenting not by some technical, psychological process that was learned from a professor at a school. You're just getting in the Word and using Jesus' signature style of teaching his disciples. Well, if it comes from Jesus, if this is how he trained leaders, then we can train children to live well and to lead well by getting them in touch with Scripture. And what better way to do it than with stories? I call it story parenting.
And paying attention to the words in red.
Why don't you give our dear listener an example of a parable that's particularly useful in parenting?
Well, if you have a kid and they're discouraged because they're working hard and it just seems like they're not getting where they want to go as fast as they can, you can share with them the parable of the seed growing by itself. And I think that parable tells us that there's no honest effort that doesn't have its eventual reward. That seed is growing. You do your part, God does his part. And I think that's an example. You're in that story, you're getting children to realize that God lets them create their future, create their character, a lot of their life conditions, that you make choices, and that those choices have real consequences. And that, it says a lot of this is going to happen. And the farmer, you remember the farmer? He doesn't know how. You don't have to know everything to know in agriculture how to grow a crop. Now, it can help to know a little bit about the biological or the scientific aspects of that, but it's really pretty simple. And you trust God. The farmer trusts God. If he goes out there and cultivates the field and he plants the seed and he does what he's supposed to do, that there will be a harvest, and he knows it takes a little while. There's a delay. And in what we do, if you prepare yourself, if you work hard, if you do what you're supposed to do, that there's always going to be a blessing. It may come later than sooner, but don't get disappointed. It's true in athletics, Alan, like your son. All of that can blossom all of a sudden, whether it's artistic ability, whether it's professional skills, whether it's spiritual development. It's how life works. But you can share that parable with the child and help them to become more confident. You do your best, God will bless. Trust it.
We'll mention the parable you're talking about is in Mark 4:26 through 29. One of the things, and you've got it broken down in this chapter about the secret of the seeds, what you've named it. One of the things you mentioned in here that I never really thought about is you titled this one little spot, "Successful People Sleep." And so there's a sentence in here, "Burning the candle at both ends does not lead to more achievement or excellence." And for whatever reason, that kind of hit me like, I never really thought about that. We put so much pressure on kids to do well at school, and then after school, do well in sports, and then after that, do well at this or do well at that, clean your room, do that. And I never really thought, they just need downtime sometimes. I need downtime. I don't know why it never crossed my mind. They might need some downtime too, but that really hit me. It hit me kind of hard. I'm thankful you shared that in here.
Well, I think about if I'm going to do a seminar, if I'm doing a leadership seminar, one thing I always try to do is get some sleep. I can spend a lot of time trying to cram and stay up till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock. But inevitably, it won't go well. And if I have prepared myself, I can trust that I have done what I needed to do, and then get a good night's sleep and know if I do the best I can, God will use me and bless this group of people. I have a better time. They have a better time. My recall is sharper than if I try too hard and end up not sleeping.
I wanted to, and Daniel, I don't want to cut in front of you. I just wanted to, just two real quick questions. This is the first time I've seen you as the editor. You're always the author, by yourself. From a technical side, what did you ask of the people, the other authors that you asked to write? I mean, what was your sales pitch to them of the Parenting by the Parables, or like assignments?
Well, I told them you're going to make a difference in people's lives. You're going to bless children. You're going to bless parents. You're going to be blessing our brotherhood and the kingdom. We don't have a lot of parenting books in our brotherhood. And I think that we need to develop more practical tools for people that are approachable, that are not intimidating, that are simple and biblical and practical. And so I reach out to a lot of people. We have Bible professors from Freed-Hardeman University, Greg Tidwell, the editor of the Gospel Advocate, Lonnie Jones, probably the most noted, a counselor, and he and Ben Hayes, counselors, and
rock climbers.
But a lot of very capable people who have insight. I like biblically conservative people who have insight, and I always say think outside the box, but not outside the Bible.
I like that. I'm writing that down. I'm going to use that. I'll give you credit for it. I'm going to use that. I do like that. And the other thing, not really a question, but the point I wanted to make is, if one of the biggest challenges that I've had with being a parent, I have a 19-year-old and a soon-to-be 18-year-old, is just two words: letting go. Allowing them to make their mistakes, or even me giving up some control. And the way you write all your books, there's always some lots of gold nuggets that I find when I'm moving through chapters. And Lonnie Jones did this one, as you being the editor, but and I love, my kids would tell you that my favorite parable is the parable of the lost son. And I really like what Lonnie says here on page 73, and it helps me understand about letting go. It says, the pictures of first steps being toward mom are usually staged. Babies' first steps are away from mom. If we restrict and do not allow our children freedom as they grow, they will have the false notion that they are well-pleasing and have never strayed. They are compliant, but that compliance comes with scorekeeping and resentment. In his TED Talk, The Dawn Wall, Tom Caldwell pointed out that a parent's job is to prepare their children for the path and not prepare the path for the children. We must allow children to exercise free will. They learn, I am capable, I am significant, and most importantly, I can influence my outcomes. So that's helped me understand, even at this point of my life journey with my kids, is letting go, that you got to let go and you got to trust.
Well, and God did that in the Garden of Eden. Could he have put a barricade around the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Well, he could. But he gave instructions, and he explained consequences, and then he allowed them to make their choices. Now, they made a mistake and they sinned, but God wasn't done. When you look at the book of Genesis, you see failure and then God stepping in, failure and God stepping in. And that occurs over and over again with Adam and Eve, and then with Cain, and you have the flood, and you have the Tower of Babel. God doesn't abandon his people, but he doesn't indulge them.
He's not a micromanager.
He's not overprotective, because he's allowing them to grow in love. That's what life is about. That's the great commandment. It's what life is about. It's about growing in love, growing in relationship with the Lord and with other people. And without freedom, you don't really learn how to love.
I think that's an empowering message. Here in America, if you go to a tourist attraction or something, there's guardrails everywhere. Everything's padded and railed and protected. A lot of places I've been in the world, you go to a tourist attraction, and there's not guardrails. You could very easily just walk off a cliff or whatever. People aren't quite as protected. And sometimes I think we can be too protected, and it makes us not think for ourselves and reason about the consequences of our actions. I've got 4 kids myself, ranging from age 19 down to age 5. And I found that the more kids I have, the less I know about parenting. When I just had one kid, I was a really, really good parent, But the more kids I had, the worse I got. What advice would you give to somebody whose kids are grown, and maybe the kids, one or more of them, haven't turned out like you had hoped that they would, and maybe they've strayed from the Lord, or they've made some bad choices in their life? That's got to be painful to watch as a parent. How would you advise that parent?
I think the main thing is we just don't stop loving. I think of the prodigal son's father. He let his son go, and I know that was horribly painful. And I'm sure there wasn't a day he wasn't looking down the street. But the prodigal came home. We know Proverbs 22:6 tells us, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. I don't think that is in the biblical literature, that is a maxim. It's absolutely true that in most cases, this is what happens. Otherwise, people are robots. If you had the right parents, you go to heaven. If you don't have the right parents, then you don't. But your voice is in their head, and their conscience is on your side. It was hard for Paul to kick against the pricks, against the goad, the ox goad. And your voice is there. It's like a seed that's been planted. And believe in the power of presence and the power of prayer. And it may be that there's just some moment when it's not necessarily in the times of celebration, but in the times when they're hurting, when there may be that very special conversation where they have a moment of pause and they have a chance to reflect and find their way back. The prodigal son came to himself. If what we're teaching is true and biblical, then there's a path back if they choose it.
Well, you wrote a chapter, and chapter 11 is about the unforgiving servant. This is a parable in Matthew 18:21 through 35, and you've gone through here talking about forgiveness. And one thing that struck me in this, and it struck me on a lot of different levels, but you wrote, let me find it here. You wrote, help your child develop the habit of talking to people and not about people, at least not in a disparaging way. So teaching your child to talk to people is going to let them have a more forgiving heart. And it just made me think, it's kind of a lost art talking to people. Kids nowadays are so entrenched in devices and different things about, that are so tailored specifically to them that I know my wife teaches, and she says it's hard to get them to talk to her. Those kids won't talk to each other. They just text. Next, so talking to each other is kind of a lost art. Can you speak on the forgiveness chapter and maybe the importance of developing those social skills with your kids?
Well, conversations are sacred things. How do you transform the world? You do it through words. How did God create the world? Through words. And the clearer our words, the more specific rather than generic and vague, we have the opportunity to develop ourselves and to develop our dreams and our goals. So I think part of it is understanding that that's how God produced change. That's how we produce change. That's the power of the gospel. We're transformed through the renewing of our mind. So we need to have some limits on technology, and we need to have time. Meal times. Meal times are sacred times. It could be breakfast, it could be supper, but it's just non-negotiable for spiritual people. It's a time to connect with your kids and know what was going on in their day and to have the relationship, because really your ability to help them is going to be based on the quality of the relationship where they can express themselves, and we don't jump down their throats, even if they are not always appropriate, but we do try to guide and redirect. Or I think most of the time you parent with questions. If somebody's unforgiving, well, how would you feel if this happened to you? I think elders do it, preachers do it, I think parents do it. You use questions, because telling, well, they can shut their minds off when you're telling. But when you're asking, it demands their engagement. So instead of you trying to push and do all the heavy lifting, the responsibility falls on them to formulate ideals and to express those.
The Socratic method, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's key to leadership. I teach that everywhere I go. You lead with your ears and you lead with questions. And that doesn't mean there's not a place for instruction. There is. But most of the time, people know better than they do. Kids know better than they do. But we can use these conversations to help guide them in growth in all of these areas. But if you're going to grow in love, well, I don't know of a higher expression of love than forgiveness.
I think that's good advice, and I appreciate you sharing that wisdom with us. Our time's almost up, but would you take just about a minute and let us know about your upcoming projects?
Well, I'm writing right now on the Jesus Principles, the Practice of Joy. It's a book on the Sermon on the Mount and how to have that blessed life. But I believe not just that you should know the Bible commands joy. We need to be practitioners of joy, and that's a whole different thing. And there are a few things that will do more to help you evangelize than having that spirit of faith and hope and love that is just overflowing, cascading with joy to let you open the door for these meaningful conversations.
I think this is back in the 70s, I used to watch a show called Solid Gold, and that's what this is. This is Solid Gold right here with Aubrey. As far as I'm concerned, I hope Soul Training Nation sits up and takes notes here. This is really good with Aubrey.
That's right.
I think it's awesome.
I'll tell you, reading through this Parenting by the Parables, yeah, it's a parenting book, but it's also not a parenting book. It applies directly to you, too, because I was reading, I was like, man.
It's an us book.
It's an us book, that's right.
For all of us. And I know Daniel does a really good job of closing us out, but I wanted to share something that, as I listened to you talked about your child's conscience, I don't know if I'm saying this right, is always on your side. And that's something that I try to utilize to our advantage, or as with my wife and I with our kids. When our kids were really small, I'd always say, not to make them egotistic or self-centered, but I would say, "You're the best girl in the world. You're the best boy in the world. Don't you forget that." And I was constantly reminding them of that all the time. It's probably started 15, 16 years ago. So now that they hear that, hopefully, that they hear that in their mind, rather.
Amen. They do. They hear your voice. I can still hear my mama and my daddy, and I know they will long after we're gone.
Well, thank you, Brother Aubrey, for being with us today. Thank you, my co-host, Big Al, and to our super producer over there, Big Show Joe. We want to thank the elders at the South Green Street Church of Christ for making this possible. We want to thank you, our dear listener, for letting us be a part of your day. We hope that you'll reach out to us if you have a question or a topic you'd like to consider, or we would love to hear your feedback. Email us, reach out to us on Facebook, send us a homing pigeon, whatever. And
Bringing that back.
Bring it back. I'm going to bring it back till somebody does it. That would be great.
Are they extinct?
No, they're not extinct.
I thought carrier pigeons were a thing of the past. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, that's a foul rumor.
There it was.
Yeah,
it took 30 minutes when we got there.
Get down to the end. All right. So, dear listener, until next time, keep soul training.
Soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
To learn more, you can email us at soultrainingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can write to us, P.O. Box 503, Glasgow, Kentucky, 42142. That's Soul Training.